Alrighty, let's move on to pressure, force, and head. Chapter 3 of the ATCO workbook. This would be similar to question number 1. Convert a pressure of 152 feet of water to PSI, or pounds per square inch. So there are two different ways to do this. There are two different conversions for feet of head to PSI and vice versa. We can either say that 1 PSI equals 2.31 feet of water, or we can say that 1 foot of water equals 0.433 PSI. And either one will work. Let's go ahead and set this problem up. This is a ratio problem. So let's set it up like that. We have 2.31 feet of water per 1 PSI. And that ratio will be the same for 152 feet of water for an unknown PSI, which we'll just call the variable P. And then remember from our homework last week, the way that we can solve ratios is to cross multiply. So we're going to cross multiply. If we cross multiply, we get 152 feet times PSI equals our unknown P times 2.31. And then if we want to get our variable P, or pressure, by itself, we divide both sides of the equation by 2.31. Okay, so we can rewrite it like this. 152 feet times PSI over 2.31 feet times PSI equals P times 2.31 divided by so like units of measure cancel out, these like values cancel out, and we are left with 152 divided by 2.31 equals our pressure. And if we divide that out, our pressure equals 65.8 PSI. If we wanted to use the other ratio, we could work the problem out the same way. 0.433 PSI equals 1 foot equals our unknown PSI, and again we cross multiply, so we wind up with our unknown times 1 equals U, or our unknown, And then if we cross multiply 0.433 times 152, multiply that out, 0.433 times 152 equals 65.8 psi. So that is how you do problem number 1. Problem number 2 is done the same way, except this time you're given pressure and you have to convert it to feet. So let's come up with, we'll say that in problem number 2 we're given, I don't want to solve the actual problem for you. Let's say 272 psi equals how many feet? Again, we can set the problem up the same way. 1 psi is equivalent to 2.31 feet. 272 psi is equivalent to, we'll call our unknown this time, x feet. And again, same thing, let's cross multiply x times 1 equals x, right? And that equals 2.31 times 272. So cross multiplying feet times psi, and we get a final answer in this case of 628 feet. Again, we could use the other conversion, which would be .433 psi equals 1 foot. 272 psi equals an unknown amount of feet. Let's do our cross multiplication. 1 times 272 equals 272 equals cross multiply equals 0.433 psi times our unknown. Now if we want to get our unknown on one side of the equation, what do we have to do? We have to divide both sides of the equation by that number there, and that will get our unknown, or x, by itself. So let's do that. 272 divided by 0.433, and remember we have to do it to both sides of the equation, equals 0.433 times x divided by 0.433. Those will cancel out and we'll be left with x equals 272 divided by 0.433. Let's do the math on that. If I divide that out, I get x equals 628. So problems 1 and 2 there, that's the way to think about them and how you would set them up.